Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Parallel Systems broadcast. I'm your host, Mike, and on tonight's show, we're going to be talking about why Tether, the stablecoin company, is aggressively pivoting into gold, buying not just massive amounts of gold bullion that they're storing in Swiss vaults, but also by buying gold miners. Yes, my friends, you heard me right. The stablecoin company Tether are trying to buy up gold miners. And recently, the CEO of Tether said that gold is the natural Bitcoin. Now, we're going to have to come back to that one because I almost threw up in my mouth when I heard it. But let's talk about what's going on here. You'll remember that Tether is the stablecoin company that is now essentially helping to backstop the US debt Ponzi. They have over $120 billion worth of US treasuries, along with other stablecoin companies that are also buying US treasuries because of the Genius Act. And what this is enabling the US to do is to expand the debt Ponzi further because we know that nobody wants to buy toxic US debt anymore. Nations are de-dollarizing. We saw India over summer sell massive amounts of US treasuries. They're going to gold. Everybody's going to gold. And the US is getting desperate. So what they've managed to do is get the stablecoin companies to become the new buyers of US debt, and Tether is front and center in this. Now, Tether itself, I've done episodes on this. It has a long and seedy history. Let's just put it that way. They refused to be audited for years. There was a huge correlation between the issuance of new Tether tokens and Bitcoin. So if you want to know why the Bitcoin price kept on just reflating, well, there's your answer. Go have a look at the correlation. But let's just forget about that for now. I want to talk about what's happening with Tether, and I've got this article here that I'm going to share with you. Stablecoin group Tether holds talks to invest in gold miners. What is going on? I thought the Tether itself, the Tether token, was meant to be the new star of value. Well, they don't seem to think so. And they also don't seem to trust the treasuries that they're buying. They want to go into gold. So let's try and figure out what's going on. It says Tether, the world's biggest stablecoin company, has held talks about investing in gold mining, seeking to deploy its vast crypto profits into bullion. Now, the profits of Tether are absolutely enormous. Just imagine if you had your own money printer that minted US dollars that you could then use to buy real assets. Well, that's been Tether for most of its history. It had these tokens that they told the world were equivalent to US dollars. People just believed them, which is insane. And then they used those tokens to buy real assets and to do loans, commodity financing, all kinds of craziness. And now they're buying up lots of gold. In fact, they've got $8.9 billion worth of gold bars in Zurich already. Let's continue. It says the company has held discussions with mining and investment groups about investing in the entire gold supply chain, from mining and refining to trading and royalty companies, according to four people familiar with the recent talks. So, in tonight's episode, I'm going to speculate as to what might really be going on here because I think there's all kinds of interesting angles that might be at play. I'm not saying they are, but you know me, I like to theorize, and I'm going to speculate as to what might really be going on because we know we are heading towards a financial reset. And even the CEO of Tether has admitted that he thinks the fiat currencies are going to hyperinflate and we're going to go to a financial reset. Now, bearing in mind, this is the guy who is now responsible for some of the largest holdings of US treasuries in the world. And he's saying that he thinks the US dollar is going to collapse. I don't think he meant to say that. Well, maybe he said this before he got too intertwined with the US. But we'll continue. It says Tether chief executive Paulo Ordoino has likened gold to natural Bitcoin. I know people think that Bitcoin is digital gold. He said in a speech in May, I prefer to think in Bitcoin terms. I think gold is our source of nature. Now, of course, this is absolute bullshit. There is nothing comparable between Bitcoin and gold. They're at complete opposite ends of the monetary spectrum. Think about it. Gold comes from nature. It's tangible. It's a store of value. It has zero counterparty risk and it's analog. So let's compare that to Bitcoin. Bitcoin is digital. It can be replicated by anyone. Anyone can create the same kind of network effect as Bitcoin. It's really only the branding of Bitcoin that makes it somewhat unique. It's intangible. It's the most intangible asset in the world. It's got what, 15 years of history compared to gold's 5,000 years. It's dependent on the energy grid. It's dependent on digital infrastructure continuing to work. It can be taken out by a solar flare. They're nothing like each other. And the people who push the narrative that gold and Bitcoin are somehow the same are feeding you a lie. What they want you to believe is that Bitcoin has all of the safe haven qualities of gold. It's a wealth preserver with all of the explosive returns of a crazy volatile speculation. Well, it can't be both. That's not the way it works. So I think when he says that gold is natural Bitcoin, he's trying to convince people to buy Bitcoin. That's his plan. He wants you to buy Bitcoin. The US wants you to buy Bitcoin. They want you to buy into the digital asset space. Meanwhile, they're buying lots of gold. So something doesn't add up here. Let's continue. Within the conservative gold mining sector, Tether's interest has been greeted with surprise and questions about whether the unconventional newcomer will succeed. They like gold. I don't think they have a strategy. No, I don't think they've got a strategy. In fact, I find it absolutely extraordinary that this company is now at the heart of the US debt Ponzi. Just think about how wild it is. This company comes along, creates this random crappy token, refuses to be audited, never ever has been audited, and then all of a sudden is taken by the US and used to backstop their debt. It seems to me just a little bit too good to be true for the US, doesn't it? It goes on to say one of the world's most profitable crypto companies, Tether, runs the USDT token, which is pegged to the US dollar and has a market capitalization of 168 billion, but that can go to infinity. That's why the US really likes this, because Tether can just issue another billion tokens tomorrow. It's just putting some extra zeros on a screen. But now just think about how that could be used going into a financial endgame, that you could just load up this company with toxic debt, knowing that when you default, you're essentially going to have no recompense. No one's going to come back to you. No one's going to go to war with you. Historically speaking, if you defaulted on your debt, you'd have a lot of trouble. But you could easily get rid of Tether. Now, what you also could do is get Tether to buy lots of gold, and then you could take the gold off Tether going into the end game. Now, how could that work? Well, think of it this way. If Tether truly have been cooking the books like everyone was thinking going into 2025, everyone thought they were cooking the books. If that's true, well, you can just bankrupt Tether going into the end game, say, oh, look, it was a fraud all along. It's their fault that it's all collapsing. And now we're going to take what? Well, we're going to take all of the gold that they are now buying up. Just an interesting angle to think about. He says that they've generated profits of 5.7 billion in the first half of this year alone. That's a huge, staggering amount. Tether is also one of the biggest holders of US Treasuries, making its money from the interest it earns on the bills it holds to back the token, the world's most traded cryptocurrency. Now remember, Tether is responsible for over 65% of all Bitcoin transactions. That's something you have to understand. When Tether go, the Bitcoin price goes too, because as that collapses, or if people realize that Tether all along was just a scam, then of course people will realize that the Bitcoin price going up was a scam, and that all of this propaganda around it was just to get people to go down the wrong path going into the end game. That's what I think is happening, just my opinion. It goes on to say that Tether has already amassed a significant position in bullion with 8.7 billion of gold bars in a Zurich vault, according to financial statements, which it uses as collateral for its stablecoin. In June, Tether Investments, which is in charge of investing the company's profits, paid 105 million for a minority stake in a gold royalty company. So they're not just looking to buy gold bullion, they want to actually really go into the gold space. Now, I don't know how I'd feel about owning a company that was being funded by Tether, to be honest. I don't think I'd feel very good about it. But in any case, they've invested a further $100 million in Elemental on Friday. And you can see here, Elemental Altus Royalties. Concurrently with and in support of the transaction, Tether Investments SACV. So remember as well, Tether is this Cayman Islands company. They are so shady, they are so illegitimate in my eyes that I just cannot believe that they are at the heart of the financial system. It just tells me that we're getting very close to something catastrophic when the US, the largest debt market on planet Earth, is having to use a random Cayman Islands company to allow it to fund itself, to keep going forwards. That is endgame stuff, and no one really speaks about it like that, but I do. Goes on to say that Joanne Sartori, head of business initiatives at Tether, said the investment was part of the group's strategy to increase its gold exposure. Tether separately held talks with Terra Nova Resources, that's a company I know, a gold mining investment vehicle based in the British Virgin Islands, though these did not result in a deal. And Tether did not respond to requests to comment on its gold strategy. I've shown you this one. Now I want to show you this. This is from the Tether CEO. USDT will be useless in the long term. So this is the brilliance, the genius of the Tether CEO. He's literally just told the world that his token will be useless in the long term, but you should trust it. You should trust it with everything that you've got. Tether CEO Paolo Ordo Pizzo has come out as a Bitcoin maximalist. Of course he has, explaining that in the distant future, Bitcoin will overcome all of its fiat pairs. In a recent podcast, Ordoino stated that in this hypothetical future, Tether's USDT had no place. So it seems to me like Tether are being used for a very specific purpose to backstop US debt, to push people into Bitcoin, which, like I said, could be the biggest financial trap in human history. You guys buy Bitcoin, plebs, you go into Bitcoin, we're all going into gold. And then they could also be imploded at the last minute, and that gold could find its way where? Well, it could find its way to the US, which of course needs to build out its gold holdings substantially because China has 40,000 tons. And the rest of the world also is buying gold hand over fist in preparation for a reset because nobody trusts the debt Ponzi anymore. Nobody trusts sovereign debt. Now listen to this. He said, I expect a financial reset where all national currencies will collapse and experience hyperinflation. Well, I actually agree with him on that one. Consequently, USDT will become completely useless. And at that point, I believe the world will only use Bitcoin. Again, I think he's lying. Let's go on to this last one. Just before we finish, I wanted to show you this article here. Gold could hit nearly $5,000 if Trump undermines Fed, says Goldman Sachs. Now remember, Donald Trump is trying to stack the Fed in his favor, doing what pretty much every nation that has hyperinflated their currency has done, going into the hyperinflation where they try and get the central bank to essentially become non-independent. They want to stack it, make sure that they can just use it like a money printer. Now, whoever's behind Trump is clearly setting up for that endgame scenario. They're going to take interest rates really low. They're going to flood the system with new currency. Tether's probably going to be buying up as much gold as possible, ready for the reset, and then they're going to disappear. I don't think that Cayman Islands company is going to last forever. Although maybe they do. Maybe they become the new central bank. Who knows? Maybe that's the end game for the US. They're going to actually turn Tether into the new central bank. It could happen. Hopefully not. But in any case, yeah, that's what's happening over in the US. And if Donald Trump is going to undermine the Federal Reserve's perceived independence, and I say perceived independence, what do you think people are going to do? They're going to rush into gold because they know that is the sign that the US is just going to destroy what's left of the shitty dollar's value or perceived value because it's got no value. And it says gold prices could climb to almost $5,000 an ounce if Donald Trump's attacks on the Federal Reserve damage the US central bank's independence, Goldman Sachs has predicted. Gold has rallied 35% this year to more than $3,500 per troy ounce, making it one of the world's best performing major assets, something I was predicting on the show for years. Investors and central banks have piled into the precious metal as they seek protection from political uncertainty and debt worries that have sent traditional havens such as the dollar and government bonds tumbling. We've been talking about this for a long time. We've been predicting the end game. I said going into the end game, what we'd see is a rush of people out of sovereign debt and into gold. And now the world's waking up to it, but the gold price has already moved from when we started discussing this from around $1,800 an ounce to $3,500 per ounce. It's actually above that now, and it shows no sign of stopping, and they're predicting maybe $5,000 per ounce. It will eclipse that as well, because going into a financial reset, when the debt is too big and nobody wants that debt, you can't reverse that. There's no way out of it. All you end up with is desperate last-ditch attempts, which is what Tether are, to try and kick the can one more time. But once you take away the independence of the central bank, because that's all you can do, and you just print to oblivion, that's the final stage, and that's where we're heading into. It says a scenario where Fed independence is damaged would likely lead to higher inflation, lower stock and long dated bond prices, and an erosion of the dollar's reserve currency status. Gold is a store of value that doesn't rely on institutional trust. And it says here, and this is really important, the bank's base case is that the gold price will rise to $4,000 per troy ounce by mid 2026. I think we could actually get there by the end of the year. Stroyven said that a big move out of the dollar assets, such as US Treasuries, by private investors could push the price even higher. Now, again, I actually put out a Substack article and a Patreon article to my subscribers earlier this year predicting this exact thing. He said if 1% of the privately owned US Treasury market were to flow into gold, the price would rise to nearly $5,000 per troy ounce. Now, I wrote an article on this called the reverse dollar milkshake theory because I was saying, no, the dollar milkshake theory is completely wrong. What's going to happen is the reverse dollar milkshake theory when we've got $28 trillion of marketable US treasuries. Once people start to realize that the US is just going like a freight train into a brick wall, we're going to see a rush out of that. But there is only $400 billion of gold annually that is mined, and only around $100 billion of that is available to buy as investment gold, and that's at $3,500 per ounce. So in this article, what they're saying is that if just 1% of that privately owned US Treasury market flows into gold, there's not enough gold to go around. The price has to go up, and that's precisely what I warned my subscribers about. I said, now's the time to really consider where we're going to be at the end of this year, because it's only going to take a small amount of those holdings of US Treasuries to go into gold, and there's not enough gold to go around, and therefore the gold price must rise substantially. And that's precisely what's now happening. So very interesting times to be alive. We are watching the financial reset unfold before our very eyes with the tariffs and the trade war and the insane narratives and strange twists and turns, including the use of Tether. But ultimately, this all goes one place. It's going towards a financial reset. The US is bankrupt. We all know that. And so they're going to have to come up with some kind of solution to try and kick the can one more time. I think we're going to see them pump a lot of new currency into the system. We're going to see those interest rates go down. And gold is going to respond to all of this one. Gold is going to continue to rise as people realize there is no credibility left in the system. And we are heading really quickly towards some kind of endpoint. And that could just happen overnight. So now's the time to really consider your exposure to this system. Could we see a melt up? Could we see some kind of blow off top? Yes, we certainly could. But I've studied historically the different times when we've had melt ups, and gold usually outperforms in real terms during the melt up. The assets that are melting up don't actually give real returns. Some might do for a time, but other ones just give nominal returns. So interesting times to be alive. Let me know in the comment section what you think of Tether's recent move into gold. Do you think that this is a sign that we're getting close to the end, that they themselves no longer believe in their own spin? Let me know in the comment section. And like always, I'll see you in the next one.